The Galactic Council's dire warning. The Galactic Council chamber was rarely filled with such tension. Delegates from dozens of civilizations sat in a massive circular hall, their bioluminescent screens flickering with data. At the center stood Chancellor Valtherin, an elder of the Seraphis race, his golden eyes scanning the gathered leaders with grim resolve. A deep chime rang through the chamber. The session had begun. "The matter before us," Valtherin intoned, "concerns the Zorvax dominion and their invasion of an unaligned world, Earth." A murmur spread through the assembly. Earth? A primitive, pre-FTL planet on the galactic fringe? It was of no political consequence, no strategic value. Why was this even a discussion? A large, armored figure stepped forward, General Korik of the Zorvax Dominion. His crimson warplate reflected the chamber's dim light. "This is a waste of time," Korik growled. "Earth is undefended. Their kind have no space fleets, no planetary shields. My fleet will subjugate them within a cycle." A voice, calm yet sharp, cut through the chamber. "You are mistaken." All eyes turned back to Valtherin. The elder's expression remained neutral, but his words carried weight. "You do not understand what you are about to unleash." Korik scoffed. "Unleash? What against a species barely past its own moon? Their military is archaic. Their tactics are unknown to you," Valtherin interrupted. "Unknown to all of us. And that is what makes them dangerous." A delegate from the Avani race, a feathered diplomat named Tvani, raised a hand. "Surely, Chancellor, you exaggerate. The humans have not even reached interstellar status." Valtherin exhaled. He had read the reports, studied the patterns, seen the horrors that the humans inflicted on each other throughout their history. The Zorvax were prepared for planetary invasions, but they were not prepared for Earth. "Let me tell you what we do know," Valtherin said. "Humans are not the strongest species. They are not the fastest, nor the most advanced, but they are the most adaptable. Silence. Throughout their history, they have faced extinction, disease, war, climate catastrophe. Each time, they survived. They do not conquer with strength alone. They innovate. Their technology may be crude, but give them a week, and they will turn it against you. Give them a month, and they will be improving upon it. Give them a year, and they will be at your doorstep." Korik sneered. "Empty words from a scholar. My warriors are trained for conquest." Valtherin stepped forward, his golden gaze locking onto Korik's. "You will regret this," he said, voice deathly quiet. "Mark my words, General. The humans will not only resist. They will learn. They will fight. And they will win." Korik laughed and turned away. "We shall see." As the Zorvax warlord stormed from the chamber, Valtherin closed his eyes. Fool, he thought. The Zorvax were not invading Earth. They were walking into their own destruction. The invasion begins. The Zorvax fleet dropped out of hyperspace, their dark warships casting ominous shadows over Earth's surface. From orbit, the planet seemed defenseless. Blue oceans, scattered cities, no planetary shields, no space defenses. General Korik stood aboard his command deck, watching as his officers relayed reports. "No orbital resistance detected," one of them announced. Korik smirked. As expected, begin the invasion. Dropships roared through the atmosphere, descending like a steel rain upon Earth's major cities: Washington, Beijing, London, Moscow, and Tokyo. The plan was simple: land, establish control, and demand surrender. Within hours, Earth would kneel. Or so they thought. The first clashes. In New York City, the first wave of Zorvax shock troopers marched through the streets, weapons primed. The air was thick with smoke from burning vehicles. Civilians ran, at first. Then, something unexpected happened. The humans fought back. Bullets ripped through the air. Makeshift explosives detonated in the streets. Entire squads of Zorvax soldiers were ambushed in alleyways, dragged into subway tunnels, and overwhelmed. What should have been a swift planetary conquest became a nightmare of urban warfare. Korik's comm line flared with distress signals. "Our forces in Tokyo, ambushed. The humans are using their own infrastructure as traps. We lost contact with the battalion in Moscow. Civilians are fighting alongside their soldiers." Our command post in Washington gone. A precision strike. They took out our field commander. Korik's grip tightened. Impossible. They have no technology to resist us. But that was the mistake. Technology didn't matter. Humans fought like no other species in the galaxy. The turning tide. As hours turned into days, the situation only worsened for the Zorvax. Their superior armor and energy weapons meant nothing against human adaptability. Human snipers learned to target weak points in Zorvax armor. Hackers disabled Zorvax communications, turning their own technology against them. Guerrilla warfare tactics spread across continents, making every street, every forest, every home a battlefield. Then came the real disaster. The humans captured Zorvax technology. At a secret underground base, military engineers and scientists tore apart captured weapons. Within days, they had reverse-engineered the alien energy rifles. Within a week, human forces were manufacturing their own versions. The invasion force had come expecting submission. Instead, they had armed humanity with weapons far beyond their own advancement level. Korik, watching from orbit, felt something alien stir in his chest, fear. His great fleet, his unstoppable war machine, was failing against an enemy that had been deemed primitive. A transmission from a dying Zorvax commander crackled through. General, they don't fight like any species we've conquered. They're learning. They're using our weapons against us. We must retreat. The line went silent. Korik clenched his fists. This was no longer an invasion. It was a war for survival. And for the first time in his career, he wasn't sure if the Zorvax could win. Humanity strikes back. General Korik stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching in horror as his invasion crumbled before his eyes. The once pristine battle formations of the Zorvax forces had collapsed into chaos. Reports flooded in. Entire battalions wiped out, supply lines severed, warships disappearing from the fleet's roster. Humanity wasn't just resisting. They were counterattacking. The fall of the Zorvax ground forces. On the surface, the Zorvax legions had been forced out of major cities. The plan had been to dominate through shock and awe, to overwhelm Earth's scattered militaries. Instead, they had been met with something far worse: adaptation. Captured Zorvax weapons were now in human hands. Entire squadrons of alien troopers were being wiped out overnight. Human scientists had cracked the Zorvax encryption, feeding misinformation to their forces. The invaders were fighting an enemy that learned from every skirmish, improved with every battle. What started as an invasion had turned into a slow, humiliating defeat. Then the unthinkable happened. Earth takes to the stars. At a secret military base in the Rocky Mountains, a team of scientists and engineers had done the impossible. They had reverse-engineered Zorvax starships. Within days, the first human-piloted Zorvax crafts launched into orbit. What the Dominion had once considered primitive savages were now piloting their own vessels, using their own technology against them. Korik watched in disbelief as Zorvax warships began falling, one by one. A human cyber attack disabled the flagship of his second-in-command, leaving it vulnerable to Earth's missile strikes. Hijacked Zorvax ships turned against their own fleet, their crews slaughtered by human strike teams. A makeshift Earth fleet, crude but effective, was now engaging the Dominion's warships in open space. "This is impossible," Korik whispered. The Council watches in silence. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, delegates sat in stunned silence as the battle reports came in. The Zorvax fleet, once feared across the galaxy, was being ripped apart by a species that hadn't even left its own solar system weeks ago. "This cannot be real," whispered Ambassador Tfani. Chancellor Valtherin closed his eyes. He had warned them. "They will not stop," he said quietly. "Not until the Zorvax are completely broken." Korik's last stand. On the bridge of his failing warship, Korik felt true fear for the first time in his life. The battle was lost. He turned to his navigator. "Prepare for retreat." "Sir." The officer hesitated. "They're boarding us." Korik turned, just in time to hear the blast doors explode inward. Silhouetted in the smoke stood human soldiers. Their eyes burned with fury. Their weapons were charged. The last thing Korik heard was a cold, human voice. You invaded our world. Now it's our turn. The Council's final verdict. The war was over. The once mighty Zorvax dominion, feared across the galaxy, had been annihilated, not by a superior empire, not by an ancient power, but by a species that had only just touched the stars. The trial of General Korik. The Galactic Council chamber was silent as General Korik was dragged before them in heavy restraints. His once pristine war armor was cracked, scorched from battle. His face, once proud and full of arrogance, was now a mask of defeat. Behind him, two human soldiers stood guard. Their eyes were unreadable, their expressions cold. They were no longer defending their homeworld. They were delivering a message. The Council's delegates sat in hushed awe, still grappling with the impossible truth. Humanity had won. Chancellor Val Theron rose. General Korik of the Zorvax Dominion, you stand accused of launching an unprovoked invasion of a sovereign world. Do you understand the charges against you? Korik lifted his head, his yellow eyes filled with hate. He had spent his life believing in Zorvax supremacy, in the Dominion's right to rule lesser species. But humanity had shattered that belief. They are monsters, he growled. You don't understand. One of the human guards took a step forward, cutting him off. His voice was calm, yet his words carried an undeniable weight. We understand perfectly. The entire chamber tensed. Korik bared his fangs. They learned too fast. They adapted too quickly. No species should evolve like that. His voice dropped to a whisper. They were made for war. Val Theron exhaled. And yet, it was you who invaded them. The Council's judgment was swift. The Zorvax Dominion was no more. Their surviving leaders were forced to surrender unconditionally. The remaining warships were seized by humanity. But the biggest shock came when the humans rejected the Council's authority. Earth's message to the galaxy. When asked what should be done with Korik, Earth's representatives made their stance clear. This is not your decision, one of them stated. Korik will face trial on Earth. His crimes were against us. We will decide his fate. The Council murmured in alarm. No species had ever challenged their authority so openly. No species had ever refused their laws. But no one dared object. They had seen what happened to those who underestimated humanity. A new power rises. With the Zorvax fleet in ruins and their own warships now in orbit, humanity had become an interstellar power overnight. A final transmission was sent from Earth to the Galactic Council. We did not ask for war, but we did not run from it. We will not be conquered. We will not kneel. The next time anyone thinks to invade Earth, remember the fate of the Zorvax. The message was clear. Earth was no longer prey. It was a power to be feared.